This week on the Men at the Movies podcast, we deep dive into the fifth element. Like Zorg, we frequently try to make deals with the shadow, trying to maximize what we can get out of this life. But it's when our plans backfire that we realize our need for a savior, and that's when Jesus shows up. But it's not to judge, criticize, or condemn us. Rather, it's an invitation to love, adventure, and purpose. Grab your multipass, and let's discover God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being. Hello and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name is Paul McDonald, and joining me on this Riverside studio all the way from Missouri is Andrew Winch. Hey, Andrew, how are you doing today?
Hey, doing good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm glad you can make it. And he was just mentioning as we were rolling up, he's like, oh, I forgot to tell my wife I was recording. And I frequently will have that. If I don't, my wife and I have a signal. If my office door is closed, then she's typically it's okay to enter. Sometimes if I'm writing it in the flow or working on something, I was like, oh, I really don't like being interrupted.
Yeah.
But there's a second door at the bottom of the stairs. And so it's like, if both doors are shut, that's basically my light that says we're on air.
The sanctum sanctorum.
That's right. I have first the temple, and then my office is the holy of holies, basically. Right. And hopefully I don't get struck by lightning right now.
So I guess we'll find out. It'll be a good podcast.
It'll be a really short one, or it'll be a great one. We'll come to find out. So I met Andrew a couple of weeks ago virtually. This is we've been spent about about half an hour now just chit chatting before, which is actually a short time when Britt and I. But Britt introduced us on Facebook, and so you know Britt from Realm Makers.
Yes.
And so tell me about how you met Britt and a little bit about Realm Makers and why you go to that.
Yeah, I met Britt a few years ago at Realm Makers. So I started going to Realm Makers the first, since its inception, which is, I guess this is the 10th year now. I know Scott and Becky.
Yeah, they did the Back to the Future theme, right? To celebrate the 10th anniversary.
Yeah. I dressed up as a Morlock for the skit this year. So that was sweaty.
So, I mean,
we'll just
you and I know what Morlocks are. And so from the Time Machine, right?
Yeah.
Is that what? Yeah, the books. Yes, we have books.
Yeah. So yes, you should read books, but also there's an amazing film adaptation of it from probably 98, I would say. That I love.
I watched like the one from the 50s or 60s or something.
Yeah. I won't admit that I can't get into the classics too well. But now the 90s are becoming the classics. So I guess the older I get, the more chance I'm going to like. But anyway, so I do a skit at Realm Makers every year, and this year I was actually the time traveler from the movie the book The Time Machine and the movie The Time Machine. It's never actually given a name, which was fun creating the skit for it, and I dressed up as a Morlock because I was afraid that everyone at the conference had devolved into Morlocks, and I was afraid of being eaten by them. As a typical Realm Makers conference goes. So that should kind of give you an insight into the strange creativity that goes on at these conferences. But I've been there, like I said, since the beginning. I met Britt, I think probably 4 years ago. We, shared common interests, obviously in Christ and in creativity, and he gravitated toward the same friend group that I did. So we didn't ever have a chance to sit down and talk one-on-one too much over the years until this past year, whenever, we were kind of hanging out, just 3 or 4 of us. And I got to talk to him a little bit more intimately about, kind of our passions and got to know each other a lot better.
And as you said, you called We talk about our drinking here. Occasionally when I record in the evening, I'll have a beverage. So
yeah, why didn't we record
the
in
cool
the
thing,
evening?
you make your Huh?
I said, yeah, why didn't we record in the evening? I'm over here drinking orange juice.
Next time we'll record in the evening, and
Yes.
we'll be toasting together.
There will be libraries.
So, but you make your own. You said you made some blackberry moonshine and some a Belgian quad.
Yeah. That was my my COVID hobby. Was getting into brewing, and if it can be brewed, I've tried it. I haven't tried any rice wine yet, but I'm on the cusp. I'm also getting ready to make a rum. So I am in Missouri, so it is more legal here to do any sort of alcohol making that you want to. So let's get that out on the table.
I can cut that if you're worried if the ATF agents are going to bust down your door.
No, from watching YouTube videos and seeing the amount of stuff that people do, and even people admit to selling it and stuff, which is absolutely bonkers. And it's a different world we live in now, and it's just for me, so I'm not worried about it. Yeah. Little old me.
So you're a physical therapist there in Missouri.
Yes.
Which is like in Realm Makers is a conference for sci-fi fantasy writers, Christian sci-fi and fantasy authors, writers.
Yeah.
And so I see if you get to watch, we'll post something on YouTube about the diva dance and all that, because it's such a great visual, such a great scene. So check out our YouTube channel at Men at the Movies. You'll be seeing us, hearing us while that scene is going on. But you have a Havoc t-shirt on.
I do.
And so tell us a little bit about what you do with Havoc.
So I've been with Havoc since its inception. It was owned by a parent company, again, about 10 years ago. But then I guess we're on season 7. So it's been 4 years ago now that I acquired Havoc. So I am majority owner and editor-in-chief of the company. And so what we do, we publish flash fiction stories. So they're stories under 1,000 words, and it's all fiction, hence the name flash fiction. But we right, it's brilliant. So we publish across genres within fiction. We obviously have a love of speculative fiction, all things sci-fi fantasy, but we don't exclusively publish that. We publish one flash fiction story every weekday, and every day has a different genre. So it's Mystery Monday, Techno Tuesday, which is science fiction, Wacky Wednesday, which is humor, Thriller Thursday, and Fantasy Friday. So you can go on the website, which is gohavok.com. That's GOHAVOK.com. And
K, not C, K.
Yeah, we're creative. But and it's backward too, so we're like super creative. But you can read these stories for free the day that they're published, and then you go on there and you can comment, you can upvote them. There's no downvoting and there's no negative comments. It's a positive, creative, uplifting community. And then the best of those stories, the 30 best stories, actually get published in an anthology every 6 months. So we have themes like, so you won't be able to see it if you're just reading or listening to the podcast, but I'm holding up our most, it was season 5. So it's not our most recent one. It's two anthologies ago. But we published them in a physical copy of the anthology, which you can get on Amazon. You can get through our website, all that kind of stuff. And then we have some exclusive content in there as well. I publish a story in each anthology and things like that. So it's kind of a fun, progressive competition. You submit stories. Yeah. If they get acquired, you get put on the website, and then you get, voted for. And it's not just a popularity contest. The majority of the weight of what gets published in the anthology comes from the editors. So the stories that we like best, though we do take those reader audience preferences into account. So then, you get in the anthology, and there's an editor's choice and there's a reader's choice. So it's just a fun way to publish, unpublished authors or newer authors. We have featured authors and things like that in each anthology. But I think in the last 3.5 years, I know we've published over 1,000 stories. which I don't know many publications that can say that. So that's something that we're really proud of, is that we're giving writers a chance to get their name out there. So it's been a worthwhile endeavor for sure.
Yeah. And the fact that it's 1,000 words or less, and just to put that in perspective, typically a page is about 250 words. So this is a story in less than 4 pages.
Yeah.
So should take you less than 5 minutes to read it.
Yeah.
So definitely check it out. Interesting stories. And if you don't like it, you haven't really lost anything, because it's less than 5 minutes. You know, you're probably, how long do you spend scrolling on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook? I mean, you can lose half an hour in the blink of an eye on Facebook.
Absolutely.
So do something a little more productive and check out some stories from new authors. And you never know, you might discover the next up and coming, guy or girl who's going to be writing something awesome down the road.
And there are links to all those authors' bios and websites in each story. So if you do happen to like what they write specifically, you can go on and, like you said, find yourself a new author. So.
Yeah. And I'm always looking for new people to read. So
yeah,
especially I don't write the sci-fi fantasy stuff, but I love reading it. So, I've read Lord of the Rings so many times, and Robin Hobb and Patrick Rothfuss.
Yeah.
I love those people. But you didn't come to hear us nerd out about books.
Let's nerd out about other things.
Yeah, we're going to nerd out about a movie. So we're talking about The Fifth Element today. You've got Bruce Willis, Mia Jovovich, Gary Oldman, who it's interesting. I read something that said he didn't really like this movie, but basically was doing it for a paycheck. But he did a pretty good job. You've seen some actors really sort of mail it in, and he doesn't really mail it in. He almost goes the other direction and really overacts probably.
Yeah. There's one scene, I don't want to jump ahead, but there's very few scenes in this movie that I felt like the dialogue could have been written better. And there's one scene where somebody comes up to Zorg. He's the owner of a giant conglomerate corporation, nefarious corporation. And his little minion comes up and says, "Sir, we need to fire 10,000 people, we don't know where to fire them from." He turns around and says, "Fire 1 million." Like it was such a Dr. Evil moment. It's like, really?
Right.
But short of that, it was almost endearing, but yeah, that's it was a funny scene for me.
And so in this movie came out in 97. In these movies in the 90s, is there any corporation who's not nefarious? I mean, they're all nefarious, right?
Absolutely.
Why do we think conspiracy theorists are thriving in today's world? Because we were brought up on these movies of the 80s and 90s where every corporation had some hidden agenda and something going on behind the scenes and all this stuff.
Well, it beats the trope where everybody is nefarious in the entire movie.
That's true. There's just nobody to root for in some things you watch these days.
No.
So actually, and because this is an older movie, I don't think we're going to go, I think we're going to focus more on specific themes rather than the timeline of the story. So since you brought up Zorg and his nefariousness, such a great word.
Yeah.
Nefarious, not nefariousness. I don't know if nefariousness is a word, but
it is.
Sure
it is.
So you brought up Zorg.
Jean-Baptiste Emmanuel Zorg. What a name.
That's a fantastic name. Really? It was Jean-Baptiste?
Yeah. He's the only one that says his whole name in the whole movie. That just tells you a lot about him there. Also, it's a French-made movie, and it was the biggest French-made movie for a long time, which is just notable. But
and again, very weird. It's like a 71 on Rotten Tomatoes, but either loved by the critics or despised. It was both nominated for an Academy Award for sound editing, lost to Titanic. Yeah. I think everything lost to Titanic that year.
Yeah.
But also was nominated as like a Raspberry Award or worst plot, worst whatever. Like it both got Academy Award and all these other award nominations and wins, and then like stinker awards. So you either love it or hate it.
Risks, right? Yeah. I mean, any piece of art that takes risks is going to have, shortcomings, or at least people that think they're shortcomings. But, and you'd mentioned the sound editing. It's like, I rewatched it last night and I focused on the soundtrack, and it's brilliant. I don't even remember the name of the composer, but it's got like Lindsey Sterling elements, and it's like if you're watching Blade Runner and like Miss Marvel, it's got like those Eastern vibes of it, and it totally immerses you. But yeah, the music and the score was brilliant for sure.
Well, and as I've been diving into my learning more about movies and the process of movie making and filmmaking, it's interesting how you watch a scene and how much of it is created and crafted by the music that you're watching it to. Like you think, watch one of your favorite scenes and then said, how would this play if there was no music behind it? Because by the way, that's how it's shot. There's no music playing when the actors are going. It's added all in the background. Sometimes it's created after the fact. And so it's super interesting to sort of take that approach of, they were just two people doing this or doing this or that, and they added the music afterwards. To create that tone and that vibe of the thing, as they say.
Well, and Fifth Element was, they did use a lot of practical effects. They didn't use a ton of CGI other than, where they had to. But yeah, newer movies too, just acting out an entire scene in front of a green screen, that I can't imagine the difficulty level.
So when we look at Zorg and the Shadow, the Shadow is the big bad, the big ball of fire, described as, and I can't remember if it actually had a name, but it was it was just evil.
Yeah, he had a cryptic, like ancient name that was mentioned at the beginning. I can't remember it, and then it was called Mr. What did I say it was earlier? Anyway,
Mr. Shadow.
Mr. Shadow, that's right. Yeah, which
just
is a
in
pretty
case you had any concerns, any thoughts, what side he might be on. It's right. Mr. Shadow's calling.
And also, anytime anybody has any face-to-face communication with it, they bleed inexplicably from their forehead, black blood, and not from there's no fissure there. It just kind of appears. There's just black blood that runs down their head. So that's not a good thing. As a health professional, I can tell you that is not healthy.
If you have blood dripping down your face, you may need to seek emergency medical attention. That's our plug. That's our PSA for today.
That's right.
So we look at Zorg, and he's been interested in acquiring these stones. If you're not familiar with the movie, there's basically, it opens in an Egyptian crypt, and it's a really interesting way to open it. And this guy discovers this thing where it's like, oh, evil comes every 5,000 years. But you put these 5 stones together with a perfect being, supreme being, and they create the 5th element that defeats evil.
Oh, and you did forget to mention one of the stars is Luke Perry. He is in that beginning scene.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So,
the first 30 seconds of the movie, he's there. The old 90210.
Right, exactly. Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
My wife loves that show.
Yeah. But no, absolutely. I think that's a great framework for a movie. The Stones, not Luke Perry.
Hey, what you got against Luke Perry? So you have this setup that evil is coming. You need these stones. You need this thing to set up because only this person, and as they say, we'll probably play the clip here, but I want to focus more on Zorg here and the shadow that's coming. So evil is coming, and Zorg, being the head of this nefarious corporation, being named Jean-Baptiste Zorg. I mean, Zorg is just a bad guy name.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
He's paired up with him because he's some sort of arms dealer. He works. He's disruptive. As he has this scene with the priest where he talks about how destruction and chaos actually create order and organization and all this other stuff, how bad guys rationalize their way of looking at the world. But specifically, we want to get to this conversation, and it's probably about 2/3 of the way through the movie. where we're getting close. Zorg has been assigned to find these stones to prevent evil from losing. Because evil knows, Shadow knows, it's the Shadow knows, not to go way old school. The Shadow knows that the only way it can lose is if through this fifth element. Mm-hmm. And so Zorg has been tasked to finding the stones because he's, I guess, the most evil guy on the planet. So Shadow is working with him.
I told you I do not want to be disturbed.
I know you don't want to be disturbed, except if it's Mr. Shadow, and it's Mr. Shadow on the line.
Zorg here.
Am I disturbing you?
No. I was just... Where are you?
Far now.
Good.
How are the stones?
Fine. Just fine. I'll have the 4 stones that you asked for any time now, but it wasn't easy. My costs have tripled.
Money is of no importance. I want stones.
But here, I'll see to it personally.
Well, and yeah, so that was the scene with the blood running down the forehead as well. I just adore that scene, both from the ambiguity of it and like his blind ignorance and greed, Zorg's that is. It starts out with Shadow's first words are, "Am I disturbing you?" It's such a layered statement. And he gives...
You don't put Mr. Shadow on hold.
Right. He gives Zorg every single chance to tell the truth or to try to get out or to, speak his mind or to grovel or whatever. But Zorg he's clearly terrified. I mean, there's absolutely no hiding his amount of fear at the sheer power of Mr. Shadow. And he knows this. But in the face of that, he's still buried with greed. He says, "My costs have tripled," which is bonkers in so many ways. One, to stand up against ultimate evil and say, "I want more money while you're making my skull bleed." And then 2, to be so ridiculous as to say money means anything in the face of ultimate evil. And I'm tempted to say ultimate power because that's how Zorg sees it in this moment is Shadow has, ultimate power, ultimate sway over the universe. And Zorg's basically trying to get in line. But he also, again, he is so blinded by his personal success that he thinks he can stand toe to toe with Mr. Shadow. So I love all of this because it's so symbolic of human greed. And the way the evil plays on that. It's so easy to worm into a idle thinking or an exhausted or a distracted human spirit. And that's exactly what Zorg represents. It's someone that's just completely distracted with the rat race and with personal power. And it's just so easy to manipulate that. And I love this. One of the big parts of the fifth element that I like, which I kind of hinted at earlier about, almost the nihilism of a lot of movies now. I love the polarization of good versus evil in these movies because it is easier to pick out those themes. And life is blurry enough as it is, So it's nice to have something to be able to see an extreme representation of that without all the sheep's clothing on that we get day to day. So yeah, to me, this was the epicenter of the spirit of one side of the movie, and it just epitomized what we're fighting against in our own lives.
Right. I think that's a really good way of looking at it. Like you said, it takes away the wool. So we see the wolf because they're like, oh no, that's not a sheep.
Yeah.
And the reason that we're doing this way is because if we don't realize if there's no evil, there's no need for a super weapon, right? If there's no shadow, there's no need of Lilu.
Yeah.
If there's no sin and Satan, there's no need for Jesus, right? I mean, that's how it works. And until we see evil for what it is, we don't recognize the need for the fifth element, for the key person, you know, the whatever, the Messiah.
Yeah. And one important thing to note in this movie is that Mr. Shadow didn't appear until 48 hours after he was going to destroy the universe, or 48 hours before. Until then, he was mythos. You know, there was, like you said at the beginning of the movie, they're uncovering some ancient hieroglyphs about the idea of this ultimate evil. And it's basically religion. You know, I mean, they're finding old religious texts that are speaking of this ultimate evil. And it's easy just to fall into Apocrypha. In fact, there's, a priestly cast throughout the movie that their job is to keep it quiet because they're trying to keep the stones protected from, bad people, nefarious people in the universe. So evil has done a wonderful job of burying itself throughout this movie until the last moment, which, again, reflects reality.
Yeah, and what you see as well as what we frequently do is we try to negotiate with evil, with the enemy. One more beer wouldn't hurt. One more donut wouldn't hurt. And you might say food and drink aren't really the enemy, but it's when you look at, I've been doing this, read the Bible through a year, and we're in Chronicles right now. And it's really all about Israel turning to the no gods. That you might say idol worship. And there's just a lot of context that we don't, like you and I, in our Western civilized US culture, we're not sitting around, people aren't sitting around with some sort of totem, some sort of statue that they are offering up things to.
Yeah. Not
that I know.
Right. Mooby the cow.
Awesome. Yeah, I knew I'd like Andrew as soon as he's on his list of favorite movies was Dogma, and we absolutely would do that one, but it's apparently so hard to find. It's not streaming, it's not being produced. He has a DVD, but we're like, hey, here's this movie nobody can watch anymore.
Right.
But yeah, the movie The Cow. But we look at, well, what things do we turn to meet our needs? What things do we turn to when we're stressed, when we're anxious, when we don't know what to do? And it is food. I mean, for me, if I have a hard day, I'm wanting some snacks, something to just put in my mouth. It could be drink. It could be, work could be your idol, the no God that you turn to make yourself feel better. It could be your kids. It could be sports. It could be porn. It could be affairs. It could be the church. It could be a lot of things that are not God. And we negotiate with that to find peace.
Yeah. So we say we worked hard for this thing. So, we know the price of saturated fat is heart attacks, but we deserve it. So my costs have tripled,
Right.
I've worked hard, so I deserve 3 times the amount of the thing that will kill me.
Or the other side of that picture of all I eat is basically if it's a plant, I don't eat anything processed or gluten. And I'm not saying anything and I'm not saying, moderation in everything is the key, but anything that you take to the extreme that becomes what you depend on. My friend Morgan Snyder puts it like this. He's like, the things that you worry about are, it feels like death if I didn't have that thing, if I wasn't in relationship with that person, if I didn't, whatever it is, it feels like death inside. And that's, to me, is kind of a key when you experience that feeling. I might not be dealing with the light. I might be dealing with the shadow, as Zorg is in this scenario.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I think even if Gary Oldman didn't like his performance, I think the character was crafted perfectly for the movie, for sure.
And so, as we mentioned, if there is evil, if there is shadow, there has to be light. Right. And that's there has to be a contrast. So Andrew, how is Leeloo is painted as being this Messiah character, and it's really the way they craft the story throughout and weave these different words, and this perfect is the word that comes up very, very often. And so you wanted to talk about how Leeloo both was and was not similar, shared an identity or a role with Christ, with our actual Messiah. Because again, if there's evil, we need a savior from it. So in the movie, we have evil, and Leeloo is the only one who can save us.
Yeah. So like you said, she's described as the perfect being so many times, but she's also described as engineered. Whenever there were some small little details that I noticed the last time I watched it. And so she is, she's been encapsulated in a sarcophagus for 5,000 years. Mm-hmm. And then these higher aliens take her away for a time, and then their intention is to bring her back with the stones at the time of the dire need, which is when Mr. Shadow shows up. And as she's coming to Earth, they're ambushed. The spaceship is blown up. And all that's left of her is a hand. And the first few times I saw this, I thought that she was the same beings as these big robotic beings that were shuttling her, but she just had on a suit, and she was holding on to the handle of the case that the stones were in. So she was intimately tied to these stones, so much so that even in death, she didn't want to depart from them because they were so important, and broke off the handle. But anyway, so she's reconstructed by this futuristic humanity woven together into perfect Mia Jovovich. And that's the first we see of her. And she's described as having, I think they say 600 lines of code, like DNA strands, whereas the average human, I didn't fact check it, or I don't even remember the exact numbers, but they said the average human has like 12, so it's the same DNA. It's just more tightly woven. So, and there's no need for it other than to make it more perfect. And they make it very clear that she was created. And they don't say specifically, but to me, their verbiage was that it was created by a race of beings. It wasn't created by whatever was the antithesis of Mr. Shadow, or whatever you want to see him as. It wasn't that Egyptian idea of sun and moon. It was created by not humanity, but by a higher alien race to combat this thing that they knew was coming. So I think that's one important distinction, is that it was created by a created species. So when we see her, she is the response to something uncontrollable, whereas our Messiah is infinite, and he does have a purpose in forgiving our sins and for saving humanity, but he is also God. And I think that's a very important distinction, as Leeloo was not a supreme being in the truest sense in a human body. She is all mortal. So I think that's an important distinction on the surface. But also because of that, she's flawed. All that to say that is that she in herself can be a sinful creature. She's gluttonous. She is sexual, obviously outside of wedlock, which is that's a minor thing in the grand scheme of things, but it is what it is. So she is driven, not by, a set of divine rules, but by preservation of life in general. And they make that very clear throughout the movie that time is not important. Life is important. So that's a very, again, that's a very biblical idea. It's not the whole picture, but it is an idea that all things in God's time. And I feel like that was a very strong theme that propelled her for sure.
Because you see her, and like you said, she's flawed. She comes in and she needs to catch up on what she's missed in the last 5,000 years.
Yeah. And
that, again, that idea, even this race of people who came in, before World War I, we had talked before about our grandparents being involved in World War II and the Korean War and stuff. And so this idea that war is coming. And so this race comes to take the stones because they didn't want the stones to fall into the nefarious hands of whatever's happening. They didn't want to be fought over. But that concept, as you mentioned, it's not God, but I think it's frequently looked at as God, is this very distant, we'll show up when you need us. When evil rears its head in 300 years, we'll be back to give you the stones and activate the fifth element and save the world from evil once again. But until then, I'll see you in 5,000 years or 300, when they said it's 300 years, they're coming back. So we'll see you in 300 years.
Yeah. And
I think that we look at God that way a lot of times is you're just up there. You've got this awesome thing. This, as the priest says in the beginning, this is the key. This perfect being is the key, which is the true way to look at Christ. But how they do it and how it works out frequently, and we talked about this when we talked about Eternals, is this very distant, this rational, logical, cold, and calculating God being. But that's not a true picture of who Jesus is and who God is when engaging in our lives, when in our daily fight against the shadow. Because our shadows don't pop up every 5,000 years. They pop up about 5,000 seconds, if we can make it that long. And we're constantly battling the shadow for our attention, for our affection, and where are we giving that? And they did. I thought that when they left, they told the priest, as you said earlier, your mission now is to pass on the knowledge so that when you need us, we'll be available. Which I do think was very similar to how Jesus, the commission to the disciples of take what you've learned and pass it on to others, again, so that they'll be ready.
Right.
Because I'm coming back.
Right.
It's going to take a lot longer than you thought, but I'm coming back. Hopefully not 5,000 years.
Right. Yeah. And I've been thinking a lot about the parallels and the meaning of what they term as love in the movie. Because the fifth element is love. Spoiler alert. I think you're supposed to say that before you give the spoiler. But
it's a what, a 25-year-old movie? I think spoilers have expired.
Yeah.
If you're tuned in to the podcast talking about the fifth element, we're going to be spoiling the movie. And if you don't, you're probably not our target audience.
Done. But what's interesting in this movie, in the climax, she says, "I don't know love," which is very shocking because she is framed as the embodiment. Again, they call her perfect, but they refer to the fifth element, the love. So you just assume that she is the embodiment of love, but that's not actually the case in the movie. It takes someone loving her to activate the fifth element, which in this case is Corbin, Bruce Willis. And so everything would have died if Corbin hadn't said, "I love you, give me a kiss." And it is a very strange moment, because they've shown love to each other through the whole movie. The ultimate sacrifice is laying down your life for your friends, and they've done through the whole movie. They've shown that they're committed to each other. They've shown love, but it's just this very trivial, "I love you," and then everything is fine. So I'm trying to figure out, how that parallels. And it takes a great idea and it makes it theatrical, which, I think is a little bit dangerous, but it makes for a cool climax for sure.
Let's go, Leland. Wake up. Wake up. It's time for you to work now.
Protect life. Until death.
No, Lilu, listen to me. Listen. I know you're very tired. I'll take you on a vacation when we're done. I swear, a real vacation. Just you and me. But listen to me, if you don't do something right now, we're all gonna die. Do you understand?
What's the use of saving life when you see what you do with it?
It'll be entering the atmosphere in 40 seconds.
Lilu, you're right. But there are some things, very nice things worth saving. Some beautiful things.
Like love.
Yes, love. That's good. That's a good example. Like love. Love is worth saving.
I don't know love. I was built to protect, not to love. So there's no use for me other than this.
No, you're wrong. I need you very much.
Why?
Because.
Tell her, Corbin.
Please, would you need me?
Because.
Tell me.
Because I love you.
And then, as you mentioned, the kiss and the big ball of light and everything gets saved. Her one line, what's the point of saving life when look what you do with it?
Mm-hmm.
And if you look back in Genesis, I think it's chapter 6, right before the flood, God basically said the same thing.
Yeah, cool.
Look at what man has done. Look at the abomination. Look at how far they've come. And again, not very long from the actual creation. It doesn't seem like that many generations between Adam and Eve and reset button. Right?
Yeah.
And that
Especially
just
if you
shows how
watch
quickly
the movie adaptation.
with Russell Crowe.
Yeah. Canon for sure.
Oh, for sure. But that idea, like, look at what happens. What's the point of saving life? And with a lot of these movies, it starts with this flawed principle that humans are basically good.
Mm-hmm.
And what we see in reality is that left to their own devices, chaos, disruption, shadow emerges. And that's what, whether that's Genesis or war or all this, you see the world is a broken place. We live in a fallen world.
Mm-hmm.
And that we are basically dead and fallen without the intervention of Christ, without, in this movie, without the intervention of Lilu.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the Shadow told Zorg, money doesn't matter because I'm about to destroy everything. I'll promise you whatever you want because you're going to die.
Yeah.
Again, very indicative of how the enemy works with us. I'll make whatever promise you want because once you're my slave, you're mine now. There's no renegotiating. But this idea, and this is what like I want to kind of wrestle around a little bit with. How can you protect something you don't love? Like she says, I was built to protect, but I don't know love. And I think, again, playing, spiritualizing, doing this, she's lying because she does know love because she loves Dallas. She loves the world that she's a part of. Yeah. She loves chicken, obviously.
Right. Chicken.
Yeah. She's very childlike in her wonder, but she is doing the steps, the process that needs to happen to break Corbin.
Yeah, because she straight up
Corbin
says,
is
"Tell
distant.
me."
Right. She knows he loves her, but he has to be willing to say it. She knows he needs her. And I think Jesus works very similarly with us like what I wrote down as when I was watching, we were emailing and talking.
Mm-hmm.
You see two different approaches to Leeloo with the priest and with Corbin.
Mm-hmm.
The priest knew who she was, but had no real relationship with her.
Yeah.
Like treated her like a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Corbin had no idea. It's like, okay, she's this key person. She's very important. I have no idea why. I've got to go save the world. Leeloo, this isn't vacation. You know, that scene in the sleep thing where she's like, this isn't vacation. This is very serious. I've got a mission. And again, I think we approach life with Christ very similarly. Oh, I've got this calling. I've got this important thing to do. I've got to defend Jesus against everyone out there. You know, the whatever agendas politically, socially, culturally, I need to go protect the name of Jesus.
Yeah.
And Jesus is like, I protect you. You've got it backwards. And we think we're on this big mission. We think we're the ones saving the world in his name, when really he just wants, he may not have understood who she was as the fifth element, as the perfect being, but he loved her. And I think that's what Jesus wants from us is just say you love me.
Mm-hmm. And diving into Corbin a little bit more, you know, within the first his first dozen lines of the movie, you come to understand who he is. You know, first he's this decorated, just retired guy that is capable of anything. He's flown across the galaxy. He can handle any gun. He's got all this expertise, but none of it has given him fulfillment. His wife just recently left him, and his friend calls him and says, "Don't worry, man. There's plenty of fish in the sea. There's plenty of women." He says, "I don't want any woman. I want one woman. I want the perfect woman." And he's like, "Oh, come on.
Yes,
can't
that
have
was
the
so
perfect
good.
woman." So then we realize throughout the movie that he doesn't even know that he's looking for this sense of fulfillment, but it comes to him in a way that completely changes his life. So I think that's just so powerful.
And that's like Leeloo did, drops into the back of his cab and just says, please help.
Yeah.
And it's when, like I said, she does those things. She looks that way. She asks him those questions. And even that conversation where she asked about war, or she said she's in the V, she's learning about it. And she's like, why do humans always take and destroy what they have?
Mm-hmm.
And he even says that's human nature.
Right.
Yeah, that would have been in the H's. So she gets the W and the war, and she sees what we do, what people do with the lives we're given. And we are prone to destruction and chaos. But the key message of this movie, and I think, and of the gospel, is that love, whatever I say, love overcomes the darkness.
Yeah.
Because, and it's very interesting as I'm doing this Bible reading, we are so tired of the Old Testament, you know, and you know, it's been 8 months. Imagine being the Israelites waiting for the Messiah, the promise to come.
Yeah. And it just, you know, it's easy to become dogmatic, you know, if you're just waiting, you know, if you're just protecting something and waiting and not living in salvation, living in Christ, you know, so it's easy to understand where the priests were coming from. It was their job. You know, they didn't have any promise of salvation in their lifetime. They just had the duty, you know, of staying the course, which it was sanctified, and it was so important. But to become jaded in that environment, and then to look upon the face of the supreme being, just like the priest did in the movie, you know, the supreme being, he didn't even want to look at her, you know. So the object of your abstract worship over the last 5,000 years is standing in front of you. What do you do with that? You know, obviously fall on your knees, but
yeah. But that's our religious programmed response.
Exactly. Yeah.
And what we need to do is more like Corbin. Like she says, please help. And he's like, this is gonna not end well for me.
Mm-hmm.
And as we see, she doesn't really need his help. I mean, she busted through a wall. She, obviously knows karate and all this stuff. She's fully capable of taking care of herself.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is fully capable of defending himself. He is our defender. He is our advocate against the adversary. And what we see is she humbles herself to say, help me. She invites Corbin in because she knows what Corbin needs is to experience love. And it's easy to say, well, how does Jesus need us? Jesus doesn't need us. Well, there's no need for a redeemer if there's nothing to redeem. And if you look, when it talks about for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. So the joy is relationship, our relationship with him. Which we see reflected maybe somewhat dimly, but it's still reflected in the big themes of this movie.
Yeah, I definitely think that, like you said, that's the charm of the movie is we're trying to, one half of it is trying to save the universe, save the ability to breathe in oxygen for more generations. But the other half of that is on a personal level. Each individual person is important and their relationship is important. And, to see Corbin and Leeloo make that connection. And I love the phrasing you used, being invited into that moment to save the universe, that, in essence, in that story world, that moment will be told for generations, so the ability to,
right.
So it was a parable of sorts to future generations, even though it actually happened, but just to see that will change future generations and how they will interact with each other. And to be able to, yesterday, my daughter wanted to buy my wife something for her birthday. And she gets $20 a month. And she had $23 to her name. And I was like, well, I mean, you can, how it works. And I said, you can help me buy the present that I was going to buy for mommy. So you can be a part of that. I didn't need her $23. But to allow her to be a part of that, it is huge. I think that is a cool plot element.
And I love how you pulled that in because as you were talking, I was thinking, how are we going to make this personal and practical? Because I think that's an important piece of this. We take these movies we love, but what does it mean for us personally and practically? And you just gave a great personal example of the fact that Jesus drops into the back of our cabs daily. And we get invited daily to partner with him in a story. And I love that because the priests, evil's not showing up for another 5,000 years, right? According to their theology.
Right.
But the story that the priests will now share for those next 5,000 years, the wisdom that they pass on is Leeloo dropped from the sky into Corbin's cab. And that's where the story starts for them. And to think that again, going back to what the Bible says, we have a crowd of witnesses. We have people saying, hey, we're about to change the world. It could be for one person.
Right.
It could be for ourselves. And so what can we do when Jesus drops in and says, please help? And it's not because, like you said, not with your daughter. I don't need her $23. But what she says is, I get to buy mom something and my dad's helping me.
Yeah.
Like that reverse component of it of we get invited to join in, not that God needs us, but because we need it. We need to be invited into a bigger purpose and a larger story.
And here's the flip side of that. So I have a hard time being charitable because I'm very independent. So I assume that everybody else is independent as well. So this last week, I drove past like 2, maybe 3 different people that were broke down on the side of the road. They weren't asking for a ride or anything, but I always have this strong urge to pull over. And I just never do because it's like, I hesitate 0.5 seconds too long and I'm gone. I'm going to work or whatever. So it eats at me. So pulling out of Walmart yesterday, there was somebody who was asking for money. You know, he was sitting there, had a sign and stuff. And typically I would, I got to get back to work. God is like, okay, enough. You have to give this guy money. In order to do that, this is amazing. So this guy, he's playing a sad song on a tiny violin. True story. This guy is like the embodiment of the situation. And I read the sign and it says like, I'm playing for my family. And then I actually just stopped reading the rest of the sign. I just like pulled out my wallet and threw my money at him. I was like, yes, keep playing that sad song on the violin. Cause it's like, thank you, Lord, for being so blatantly obvious that people have it off worse than me. And I need to stop and, you know, go outside of myself. So that has been a huge blessing for me to just, it's almost like a cornerstone, you know, or, you know, like a handhold. It's like, okay, I can do that, so I can do more, you know. So God is super cool in giving us opportunities, and then almost we level up from there. But yeah.
Well, Andrew, thank you for joining me on this to talk about The Fifth Element. I forgot how much I enjoyed it until I watched the movie, and I'm like, man, this is such a good movie.
It is.
So you guys should definitely watch it. And it's fun. You know, the music, the scenery, the writing, because it's so well, as you mentioned, the narrative exposition is what I call it, where they tell me what's going on in the movie, where this one, you don't, like you said, you don't know where the diva comes from. You just know she's a key figure, and that's all you need to know.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your time. Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. That's what I love about Flash Fiction is just, you know, it's you jump right into the story, you tell the story, and then you're done. And the movie just does such a great job with that. And so I really enjoyed being able to talk about it. I appreciate that for sure, Paul. It's been a blast.
Yeah. So check out, and what was your website again for those Flash Fiction stories?
Go Havoc with a K.
.com.
Yeah.
So go check those out for little bursts of creativity and storytelling, and get immersed in a quick story. So this has been Paul McDonald and Andrew Winch talking about The Fifth Element, and we hope you enjoyed it, and we hope that you join us next time here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?